By the time I saw the folder beside my plate, I already knew Christmas dinner had not been arranged for peace. My name is Maricel Calder. Most people call me Marie, though my father only used my full name when he wanted to remind me that I had disappointed him. That night, I drove to the Calder house in Squirrel Hill with a wrapped bottle of wine on the passenger seat, and no real expectation of warmth. I only hoped we could get through one meal without turning my life into a family discussion. The house looked the same as it always did in December. White lights along the porch, wreath on the door, the smell of roasted turkey drifting from the kitchen when my mother opened it. Vivienne Calder kissed my cheek quickly and glanced over her shoulder, as if even greeting me needed to be approved by someone else. "Your father is already seated," she said. Of course he was. Bennett Calder sat at the head of the dining table in his dark sweater, with one hand around a glass and the other resting near his phone. My brother, Rowan, sat to his right, relaxed and smiling, already talking about the riverfront redevelopment project near the Strip District. He had always sounded most confident when he was repeating something my father wanted to hear. I took the seat to my father's left. That was when I noticed the folder. It was thin, cream-colored, and placed neatly beside my napkin. No ribbon, no card, no attempt to pretend it was anything friendly. I looked at it, then at my father. "What is this?" Bennett did not answer right away. He waited until my mother sat down, until Rowan leaned back in his chair, until the room settled into that careful quiet I knew too well. "A simple family restructuring agreement," he said. "Nothing complicated. We thought Christmas was a good time to handle it while everyone was together." I opened the folder and read the first page. My eyes moved over words like release, beneficiary interest, collateral authorization, and Calder Family Property Trust. I did not need a lawyer at the table to understand what they were asking. They wanted my claim removed. They wanted the old house available for Rowan's project. And they wanted my signature before dessert. I closed the folder slowly and kept my hand on top of it. For the first time that night, everyone was looking at me. I kept the folder closed under my hand while everyone waited for me to behave the way I usually did, which meant staying polite long enough for them to get what they wanted. Bennett took a slow drink from his glass. "It's best for the family. Mari, Rowan's project is moving quickly, and the trust has to be cleaned up before the financing package is finalized." Rowan gave me the kind of smile people use when they're trying to make pressure look like patience. It doesn't take anything from you in a practical sense. You've never been involved with the property side anyway. That was when I understood the urgency behind the dinner. This wasn't about simplifying paperwork. Rowan had already gone too far with his investors, and now he needed the Calder house to stand behind his promise. I opened the folder again and turned one page, then another. There was a signature line with my name printed beneath it, clean and ready, as if they had already decided the answer before I arrived. Why hasn't my attorney reviewed this? The room tightened around that sentence. Bennett set his glass down harder than necessary. "Because we're family. Not every decision needs to become a legal performance." "Then why does this one come with release language and collateral authorization?" Rowan's face changed first. Just a small flicker, but enough. My father leaned back. "Your brother has earned responsibility. He stayed. He learned the business. You walked away. I felt the old accusation land, but it didn't move me the way it used to. I didn't walk away from responsibility. I walked away from being used." My mother's fingers tightened around her napkin. She looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Mari, please don't ruin Christmas." That hurt more than I expected, because she knew exactly what was happening and still wanted me to make it easier for everyone else. I slid the folder away from the plate. "I'm not signing this tonight." Bennett's expression went cold, and the fatherly tone disappeared from his voice. Bennett looked at the folder as if my refusal had insulted him more than anything I could have said out loud. The table had gone still, but not quiet in a peaceful way. It was the kind of quiet people create when they know something wrong is happening and decide not to stop it. Rowan's fiancée, Elise, sat across from me with her wine glass halfway lifted, pretending not to listen. Two of my father's old business friends stared down at their plates. My mother folded her napkin once, then unfolded it again. "You've always been difficult," Bennett said, his voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear. "Ungrateful, too. You were given every advantage, and you turned it into charity theater." I felt heat move up my neck, but I kept my hands steady. "My work keeps families housed." I said, "That isn't theater." He gave a short laugh. "You're a failure, Maricel. You dress it up however you want, but you wasted what this family gave you. For years." That word would have sent me inward, searching for some way to prove I wasn't what he said. That night, I was tired of defending my life to people who had already decided not to understand it. I placed my napkin on the table. This house stayed in the trust because I helped stabilize it after the East Carson lawsuit. I used part of Grandma Elise's insurance payout, and you signed the agreement acknowledging my interest. Rowan's smile disappeared. Bennett's face hardened. "You think a few old papers make you important?" "No," I said. "I think they make this document useless without me." That was when he looked straight into my eyes. Not past me, not around me, but directly at me, with everyone watching. "I wish you were never born." No one moved. My mother lowered her eyes. Rowan looked almost relieved. I stood, picked up the folder, and held it against my side. "If you want my signature, ask my attorney." Then I walked out into the snow, knowing I was done being shamed into obedience. I slept for less than 3 hours, and when morning came, I didn't feel brave or broken. I felt clear. My phone was already full of missed calls. My mother had called 6 times before 8 in the morning. Rowan had sent 3 messages, each one shorter and sharper than the last. Bennett had sent nothing, which told me he was either waiting for me to apologize or waiting for someone else to make me easier to handle. I didn't answer any of them. I packed 2 suitcases with clothes, work files, my laptop, and the small things I actually used. Then I pulled the locked document box from the back of my closet. I had kept it for years, not because I was planning a fight, but because my father had a way of changing the past once it became inconvenient. Inside were emails, transfer confirmations, copies of trust papers, and the repayment agreement Bennett had signed after I helped keep the Squirrel Hill house out of the worst part of the East Carson lawsuit. At the time, he had called it temporary help. Later, he called it family duty. I had learned to keep paper between his versions of the truth and mine. By 10, I had found a short-term rental in Lawrenceville, small but clean, near the Allegheny River. By 11, I changed my mailing address, froze the shared family storage account, and blocked their direct calls. Then I sent one message to all 3 of them. "All further communication goes through Nadine Pike, my attorney." My mother replied first. "Marie, please don't do this." I stared at the screen for a moment, then turned the phone face down. By noon, Bennett and Rowan would understand what they had missed at Christmas. They hadn't only lost my patience, They had lost access to the signature they needed most. Rowan started calling before I finished unpacking. I let the first call go to voicemail, then the second, then the third. By the fourth, he stopped pretending this was concern and began texting instead. "You're making this worse than it has to be." A minute later, another message came through. "Dad shouldn't have said what he said, but you're damaging the whole family now." I sat on the edge of the rental bed with my coat still on, reading his words in a room that smelled faintly of fresh paint. He didn't ask where I was. He didn't ask if I was safe. He only cared that the project near the Strip District was suddenly in danger because I hadn't signed away my rights on command. By afternoon, his tone sharpened. "Hundreds of jobs depend on this financing. Don't be selfish." That almost made me laugh, but not because it was funny. Rowan had never worried about those workers before. He worried about investors, deadlines, and the public announcement he thought would make him untouchable. My mother called next from a blocked number. I answered because part of me still wanted to hear something different from her. "Marie," she said softly, "please, be the bigger person." I closed my eyes for 1 second. Does being the bigger person mean signing away my rights after Dad humiliated me in front of everyone? She went quiet. That silence told me what I needed to know. She wanted peace, but only if I paid for it. That evening, Bennett finally emailed. His message was formal, almost businesslike. He said he was willing to discuss a fair solution and hoped I would stop acting emotionally before the situation caused permanent damage. There was no apology, no responsibility, not even one sentence acknowledging what he had said. I forwarded everything to Nadine Pike. She called me 20 minutes later, her voice calm but serious. "Mari, this isn't just a family dispute anymore." Nadine Pike's office was on Grant Street, high enough above downtown that I could see the tops of buses moving below when I sat across from her desk. She had known me for nearly 4 years through Open Door Pittsburgh, mostly as the attorney who answered my nonprofit questions when tenant paperwork became complicated. That morning, she looked at my document box like it carried more than paper. She read quietly for almost 30 minutes. I watched her place tabs on the trust agreement, the repayment note, the old emails, and the transfer confirmations from my grandmother's insurance payout. Finally, she sat back. "Mari, your father didn't ask you to sign a harmless restructuring agreement." "I know." "No," she said, tapping the folder from Christmas. "This would release your trust interest, forgive the old debt, and give Rowan room to pledge the Squirrel Hill house as collateral. All in one document." Hearing it plainly made my stomach tighten, even though I had already understood enough to leave. My grandmother had left me a minority interest in that house because she knew Bennett would always choose Rowan first, later. When Calder Development Group got trapped in the East Carson lawsuit, I loaned the company money from the same insurance payout. Bennett signed a repayment agreement then because he needed me. After he didn't need me, he started calling it family help. Nadine turned another page and frowned. "There's something else. Your housing work was referenced in their community impact materials for a grant application. Did you authorize that?" I shook my head. He said mentioning Open Door made the company look more connected to the neighborhood. That's not the same as permission. The room felt very still. For years, my father had called my work useless, but behind closed doors, he had used it when it helped him. Nadine closed the file. "There may be civil exposure here, plus board governance issues. If donors or lenders question this, the reputational damage could be serious." I looked down at my hands. "So what does he want from me?" Her answer was quiet. Not just your silence. He needs your disappearance to look voluntary. 2 days after meeting Nadine, I received the official reminder for the Pittsburgh Civic Renewal Gala at the William Penn Hotel downtown. I had known Open Door Pittsburgh was being recognized, but until then, I hadn't looked closely at the sponsor list. Calder Development Group was at the top. Bennett had paid for the main sponsorship, and according to the program draft, he would speak before dinner about legacy, neighborhood investment, and responsible development. Rowan's name appeared under his as incoming executive lead for the Strip District Riverfront project. I read the page twice, sitting at the small kitchen table in my Lawrenceville rental. The irony was so plain, it almost felt careless. My father was preparing to stand in a ballroom and present himself as a man who cared about Pittsburgh families, while trying to erase his own daughter from a family trust. I called Nadine first. Maybe I shouldn't go. You were invited because of your work, she said. Not because of him. That doesn't mean he won't turn it into a scene. Then let him try in a room full of witnesses. Later, Elspeth Monroe, my mentor at Open Door, told me almost the same thing in a gentler way. Elspeth had spent 30 years helping families fight displacement, and she had a way of making hard truths sound practical. You don't need to punish him, Mari, she said. You only need to stop hiding so he can stay comfortable. That stayed with me. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want people whispering about my family, and I didn't want my work reduced to a fight over Christmas dinner. But I also knew that staying away would help Bennett more than it would protect me. The next morning, Nadine forwarded the seating chart from a board contact. Bennett and Rowan were assigned to table 1, directly in front of the stage. My name was listed under the honorees. For the first time since Christmas, I understood exactly where I would be standing when they finally had to see me. The William Penn Hotel ballroom was full by the time I arrived through the side entrance with Elspeth. Men in dark suits stood in small circles. Women held glasses of wine. And everywhere I looked, people were speaking in that careful public voice that made every sentence sound like an introduction. Bennett looked completely at home. He stood near table 1, polished and calm, shaking hands with investors as if nothing in his life had shifted. Rowan stood beside him, smiling wider than usual, already accepting congratulations for a role that had not officially been announced. From where I waited near the stage curtain, they looked like a finished picture of success. They believed I was still hidden somewhere in Lawrenceville. Too hurt, or too difficult to matter. The program began with Bennett's speech. He spoke about responsible development, family legacy, and protecting Pittsburgh's neighborhoods while building for the future. The words sounded smooth, but I heard the empty spaces between them. I thought about the families Open Door had helped after rent increases forced them from homes they had lived in for years. I thought about my father using words like community while trying to take my name off the one document that protected me. When the lights dimmed for the honoree video, I stood still and kept my breathing even. The screen showed a mother holding keys to a new apartment. Then an older man explaining how he avoided eviction after Open Door connected him with legal support. There were short clips of tenant workshops, volunteers sorting files, and young parents signing lease papers with relief on their faces. Then my name appeared. Maricel Calder, founder and director of Open Door Pittsburgh. The applause started before I moved. At table 1, Bennett's face went pale in a way I had never seen before. Rowan turned toward the screen, then toward the stage, as if he expected someone else to walk out. I stepped into the light. I spoke about housing, dignity, and what happens when people with power decide that profit matters more than stability. I didn't name my father. I didn't need to. Sometimes the people who call your work worthless are the same people who quietly benefit from it. The room went silent for half a breath. Then the applause came stronger. When I stepped off stage, Bennett was already moving toward me, and I could tell from his face that regret had nothing to do with it. Bennett reached me before Elspeth could. His hand closed around my elbow, not hard enough to hurt, but familiar enough to remind me how often he had expected me to move when he pulled. "We need to talk," he said. I looked down at his hand until he let go. "No, we don't." His mouth tightened. "You embarrassed this family tonight. I talked about my work. You knew exactly what people would think. For once, I didn't rush to defend myself." That had always been his advantage, making me explain while he judged the explanation. "All legal matters go through Nadine," I said. "Anything else can wait until you're ready to apologize without asking for something first." Rowan appeared beside him, softer now, less certain. "Mari, we can still fix this." I turned to him. "Do you mean fix the harm? Or fix the paperwork?" He looked away. And that was answer enough. The consequences didn't come all at once. They came in professional sentences, forwarded emails, and delayed meetings. 2 days later, Nadine told me the bank had paused review of Rowan's financing package. A board member had requested an internal review of the trust documents and the company's use of Open Door Pittsburgh in public materials. By the end of the week, Rowan's successor announcement had been postponed indefinitely. No one called it punishment. They called it due diligence, governance, image protection. I understood then that powerful people often fear paperwork more than pain. Vivienne sent me a message that Friday. "Your father went too far." I should have said something. I read it twice before answering. Silence has consequences too. "Mom?" She didn't reply right away. Bennett still didn't apologize. He sent one more formal email through Nadine, asking for a private resolution. But for the first time, I could feel the difference. He finally understood I wasn't trying to ruin him. I was simply no longer helping him protect the version of himself he preferred. 3 months later, the settlement was signed in Nadine's office. I received repayment for the old loan, compensation for my trust interest, and a written release separating me from Calder Development Group's future debts. Bennett stepped back from daily leadership during the board review, and Rowan's promotion disappeared from every public document. He still worked there, but no one treated the company like his inheritance anymore. I didn't go back to the Squirrel Hill house. I used part of the settlement to buy a modest row house in Highland Park, close enough to the park that the mornings felt quiet before the city woke up. Open Door. Pittsburgh hired another case coordinator, and for the first time, I had space to work without feeling like I was borrowing permission from anyone. Vivienne began volunteering once a week. I let her come, but I kept the door only partly open. Trust, I learned, isn't rebuilt by tears. It's rebuilt by showing up when it no longer benefits you. Bennett sent one letter. It sounded like regret, not responsibility. So I placed it in a drawer and didn't answer. That Christmas, I hung my grandmother's old ornament on my own tree. If this story stays with you, share it with someone who needs to remember that peace is sometimes the bravest place to begin again.